enrichment program in return for the United States providing several 100,000 tons of food aid as a sort of initial steps leading to the resumption of six-party talks. So I suspect the North Koreans might still want to explore that, but to do it in a context where they make it very clear that people should not think that they are an easy, soft target, more vulnerable to pressure now. The instinct in this kind of system, given the intense nationalism that you have in North Korea, and given the degree to which the North Korean system is built around this personality cult and worship of a godlike leader, the intention, I think, is going to be very much, for the time being, rally around the flag, hunker down, send very clear signals, don't mess with us, we can tough this out, and we're not anybody's pushover.
If I can steal your line that you once shared with me as far as the elite of the military goes in North Korea, at a time like this, they all hang together, or they'll all hang separately. When you have a situation with North Korea feeling particularly vulnerable, and as you say, using brinkmanship, and the wires are now reporting that the South Korean government has ordered all government workers onto emergency alert, including the military. Having said that, there's no reports of any unusual military activity on the North Korean side of the border, though. This makes, as Wolf Blitzer said, for a very, very tense and very dangerous period.
I think that's true. I think it is a dangerous period, but it's not necessarily only a dangerous period because of actions being taken by the North Koreans. I think there is a tremendous potential for misunderstanding. You just mentioned the South Koreans putting their military on alert. It's a natural thing. It's a natural and understandable response. But if the North Koreans misinterpret any attempts by South Korea, for example, to put its forces on alert as somehow being aimed at targeting them, then you could see some pushback. And in fact, the South Koreans just some weeks ago held live fire exercises in the vicinity of that island in the sea off the western coast of Korea, which the North Koreans shelled. The South Koreans are not beyond their own kind of muscle flexing. So I think it's going to take very skillful management and very careful management and very high-level communications. I think there are going to be some other interesting things to watch for. For example, one is, are the South Koreans, is South Korea's president going to express formal condolences at the death of Kim Jong-il? In 1994, when Kim Il-sung died, the then South Korean president Kim Yong-san refused to express condolences. In fact, Kim Il-sung was condemned in South Korea as the architect of the Korean War and so forth. And that permanently poisoned North Korea's relations with Kim Yong-sam's government. And when President Clinton did express condolences, it made a very, very big difference. And indeed, that's something the North Koreans mentioned. So this is also going to be a test for the Obama administration. How are they going to handle this? If they just say rude things about North Korea, they could further undermine the already slim prospects of progress. So a lot of the way in which particularly the U.S. and South Korea respond to this in terms of what they say will have a, I think, significant effect on shaping the North Korean reaction. And if the North feels that Washington and Seoul are in some fashion ganging up on them or are going to put the squeeze on them now, then I think you could see some pushback.
Okay, Mike, I really hope you can stay with us, but we have Stan Grant in Beijing because you raised a couple of interesting points where you said that they will take some very skillful management during a very tense period, and crucial to that will be what Beijing plans to do. So let's go to Stan Grant, who is live in Beijing for us. And of course, Beijing is the best friend to North Korea. They are now reporting the news there. And Stan, Beijing's reaction and how they deal with this and the influence they have on Pyongyang will be crucial.
Absolutely crucial. What's really going to be interesting here, John, is the light that it shines on the relationship between the United States and China. Now, remember last year when North Korea shelled Yongbyon Island, the United States started carrying out joint exercises with South Korea just off the coastline of China. China wasn't happy about that and said that it in fact contravened Chinese territorial waters. So that relationship's really going to be crucial. And if you look at some of the comments just coming over the last 6 months from US leadership, first we had Hillary Clinton saying that the US is here to stay in the Asia Pacific, and then Barack Obama on his recent trip through the region, particularly when he was in Australia, saying that with the drawdown of troops in Afghanistan, the end of operations in Iraq, they were going to be focusing a lot more on the Asia Pacific region, to the extent of putting troops on the ground in Darwin in Australia. He had talks with some of the countries in Southeast Asia who've expressed their concerns about what they see as an increase in aggression, if you like, or certainly an increase in presence from China in their waters as well. There have been disputes between Japan, between Vietnam, the Philippines and China, all over islands throughout the South China Sea and off the coast of China as well. Also disputes between China and South Korea over their territory. So while we focus very, very closely on North Korea, South Korea and what may happen there, this relationship between the US and China, one that has been emerging as a rivalry, both economic and also for strategic importance throughout the Asia region, is really going to be put under the microscope now. China's stated aim is to become the preponderant power in Asia. It's always said, though, that it wants to do that peacefully. It doesn't want to get into a situation where it brings on a conflict with the United States. But certainly where you look at where the lines are drawn here, the US has troops on the South Korean side of the border. Their ally is South Korea. They're sworn to defend South Korea. China and North Korea have their relationship, where China certainly intervened during the Korean War on the North Korean side and helped to bolster the North Korean defenses there. It's really going to be interesting to see how this relationship works out, and when the phone call is placed between Barack Obama and Hu Jintao, what they say to each other, John.
Well, the Chinese have often complained that Washington puts too much emphasis, if you like, on Beijing's influence over Pyongyang. That at the end of the day, the North Koreans will do what the North Koreans want to do, despite the so-called influence that Beijing may or may not have over Pyongyang. So it then gets back to this question that if there is a regime in turmoil, if it is threatened with collapse, how far can the Chinese go, and what can they actually do to ensure that there is a smooth transition of leadership and that the entire regime doesn't implode?
Well, China always defends China's interests, China's sovereignty, China's territorial integrity. China's interests are always paramount when it comes to the Chinese leadership. To the extent that that impacts on Chinese interests, they're obviously going to be very, very vigilant and trying to work very hard to contain things on their side of the border. But China and North Korea do have a close relationship. It's been described in the past as being like lips and teeth. That's how close it is. It's the closest relationship that North Korea has, and it's historically based. During the Korean War, when China sent volunteers, so-called, to head across the border and to fight with the North Koreans to drive the United States and South Korean forces back, when it looked as though they were heading towards Pyongyang, was a decisive move. China has a lot of stake.
If I can interrupt, Stan, I just want to interrupt you just for a moment. My apologies. We have Christiane Amanpour on the line. We are welcoming her back to our network. She joins us now on the line. Christiane, you were in Pyongyang in North Korea during a very hopeful time when they destroyed that water cooler tower at the reactor there. Things have changed markedly since then, and now many people are wondering, what will the future hold in the coming weeks now that Kim Jong-il is dead?
Well, that's exactly right. We were there with a team in 2008, first with the New York Philharmonic, and it was around the time when there were negotiations going on between North Korea and the United States. And they came to fruition in June of 2008, when, you're right, we saw the nuclear tower, the water cooling tower at the Yongbyon plant blown up. But it was a moment of hope then, which rapidly came to an end in the summer of 2008, because apparently at about that time, most people suspect that Kim Jong-il suffered a stroke. As his health deteriorated, negotiations fell apart, and there have basically been none since then, except for there are reports that over the last several months, that the North Koreans and the United States have been talking. There were reports that potentially a food deal could be announced, a nutrition deal between the United States and North Korea this week, potentially. And there were reports, as yet not completely confirmed, but that there might be some deal, some movement on a nuclear deal with North Korea, again, agreeing to suspend their enrichment activities. But again, this has not yet been announced, but that was something that certain United States negotiators who had met several times with North Korean negotiators over the past several months, both in Geneva and in Beijing, had hoped to be able to bring to fruition.
And Christian, everyone is now looking to the heir apparent, Kim Jong-un, a man who we know very little about. We think he is in his late 20s, that he likes basketball. We heard Mike Chinoy giving us a few more details that he is a quiet, polite man. But is this the young man with very little experience, the man who can essentially create the cult of personality as his father and his grandfather did?
Well, it's probably unlikely that he will be able to do that. Even Kim Jong-il was not able to maintain the cult of personality that his own father did, Kim Il-sung. And certainly when Kim Jong-il nominated his young son to take over, people are concerned. He's very young, he hasn't got that much experience that we know of, and he's going to be taking over, we presume, a nuclear nation. We will have to wait and see. The issue here is whether it will promote more hardline policies from some of the old guard, whether they will sort of, circle the wagons around this young man, and whether it will put a stop to some of these negotiations that were going on with the United States, or whether they will be able to go through nonetheless.
And Christian, we're now entering that very difficult, tense period of time. The South Koreans are on heightened military alert. We know that the North Koreans, during these very difficult internal periods, often act out militarily. They can often shell the border. They can carry out nuclear missile tests as well as underground nuclear tests. So given all of that, the tension that we are likely to see, what are the concerns here? How quickly could this spiral out of control?
Well, that's assuming it's likely to spiral out of control. We're not sure that that's necessarily the trajectory. You're absolutely right. We were reporting back in 2009 when North Korea tested a missile that may have been capable of reaching U.S. shores. That, of course, was widely condemned, and there were more UN sanctions. North Korea then, which was absolutely livid, and said that it was only trying to get a satellite into space, which most people derided. That's when it walked away from those ongoing, nuclear disarmament talks. And so the years of the Obama administration have simply been years where they have not had those nuclear disarmament talks, except for, as I say, in these last few months, and that had some hope that this could be a foreign policy, sort of moment for President Obama if all of this had come through. And I guess people are still hoping that it will, but obviously it's likely possibly to be delayed by the death of Kim Jong-il.
Okay, Christian, thanks so much. I want to go back to our Wolf Blitzer, who is also on the line for us, because there's been some talk there about the Obama administration policy towards North Korea, which at first appeared to be engagement, and of recent last couple of years, essentially not engaging at all with the North Koreans. So how do you think it's going to change, Wolf?
Well, it's going to be, first of all, in the very short term, it's going to be extremely sensitive. Everything that the South Koreans, the U.S., especially the Japanese, for that matter, everything that everyone does right now is going to be seen potentially by North Korea as very provocative. They're paranoid to begin with, I think it's fair to say. They're going to be watching very closely. So there's a potential, as Mike Chinoy has pointed out accurately, for a dramatic miscalculation, if you will. And I think it's fair to say right now, everyone, the North Koreans, the South Koreans, the Chinese, U.S., Japan, everyone in the region wants this to be a calm, a smooth transition. But the fact that the South Koreans have already gone on a heightened state of alert, that will immediately, I fear, force the North Koreans to do something, and then the South Koreans can go further. And so everyone, I think the U.S. will be saying, in the region. Calm down a little bit. Let's see what happens. Let's not take any dramatic step that could further exacerbate what potentially could be an extremely sensitive situation. The stakes are going to be enormous for that entire region, with so many troops, literally only, eyeball to eyeball along the demilitarized zone. And let's not forget, North Korea still has a nuclear arsenal. So it's a moment that's rife for miscalculation and unintended consequences. So this, I think the North Koreans are trying, at least based on the surface, the fact that they've made this announcement calmly, the fact that they said there's a funeral scheduled for December 28th, that Kim Jong-un, the young son, the heir apparent, is going to be in charge of funeral arrangements. I think they're trying to do this in a calm, coordinated, smooth way, but they will. The North Koreans are paranoid. They think everyone in the region, everyone around the world is out to get them. If there's a overly, sensitive, overly tough reaction from South Korea in terms